Right now, we are taking a live look over Tel Aviv at this hour as we know that sirens have been sounding once again over the past several hours as Iran launches those retaliatory attacks following this weekend's strike by the U.S. and Israel on Iran. Of course, that attack killing Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and about 48 other top Iranian officials. As we follow all of this, we have been checking in with Javed Ali over at the University of Michigan. He is following everything as it develops here and joins us now live. Javed, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Josh, always nice to be with you. Thank you.
Of course. And what I want to ask you is kind of an overarching question here as we look at everything that's played out over the last little more than 48 hours here. What has kind of stood out to you about what we know, but also what we don't know necessarily?
So, Josh, now that we're into day 3 of this conflict, at least right now, it is unfolded in a way that I had assessed it would. And I wrote a piece in a platform called The Conversation Saturday morning, literally just a couple hours after you and I had last talked on Saturday. And that laid out a number of different angles that I had been thinking about. So once President Trump ordered a military campaign against Iran, and now Israel has joined in that, it has gone the way I thought it would. Obviously very broad in scope, going against hundreds of targets inside Iran, including the upper reaches of the senior leadership, to include the supreme leader. And it's amazing that Iran miscalculated and had a meeting in broad daylight on Saturday morning, Iran time, with the supreme leader and his, for the most part, large majority of his senior political and military council around him, and that was immediately struck by Israel. But on the flip side, I also wrote in that piece that once this significant U.S. and Israeli campaign got underway, that Iran would not be restrained the way they were restrained in 2020 and last year when the U.S. attacked Iran. And now we're seeing the results of that. Iran has attacked multiple countries in the Gulf. They have also tragically killed U.S. servicemen with the missile attack in Kuwait yesterday, and other civilians have died across the region. They're going against civilian targets too, and commercial shipping. So this is unfolding the way I thought it would on Saturday morning. And now President Trump has said this is going to go on for weeks.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. When you talk about the whole situation, he has said in his video that was posted on Truth Social yesterday, this could last, Operation Epic Fury, for about 5 weeks. Explain to me, once you have the supreme leader taken out, you have these top Iranian officials taken out as well, what is there left to do? What is kind of next here as we kind of go through the next 4.5 weeks?
So one thing I would have to believe the U.S. military and the Israeli military are thinking through is that next level of Iranian leadership, both within the clerical establishment, the people who have now moved up within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, other elements of Iran's security apparatus. Those people are all probably being targeted as we speak. And we heard on Sunday, so now yesterday, that in the aftermath of the supreme leader's death, that there's this interim committee of 3 people, one including a senior cleric, who will now be responsible for running Iran. And another person, a guy, I think he's also part of this committee, named Ali Larijani. Even before the conflict started, he had been delegated the responsibility to manage Iran's response to the attacks, and I think he is still alive, and he's part of that committee. So those folks are going to be targeted. But Iran still is able to use its ballistic missile capabilities, its drones, its cruise missiles, and they are firing these minute by minute. And these are also things that the U.S. and Israel are going to be looking to destroy: the launchers, the weapons themselves, the production sites, the storage sites. So that's another element of this, and then other aspects of Iran's security apparatus. Those are all going to continue to be hit in the coming weeks.
After all of this unfolded, we heard from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He said the UK not getting involved in this at all. Then he posted another statement and actually a video message yesterday saying the U.S. had asked to use some of the British bases there. across really the world to try to kind of fire at Iran to help them out here. So he granted them permission to do that. How significant of a move is that?
Well, because this campaign, as President Trump said, is probably going to last for a while, that at an operational level, the U.S. would benefit the U.S. to have access to more bases, either to launch from or refuel from or rearm from, whether they're in the region or other parts of the world. So that's one of the reasons why the UK Prime Minister decision is significant. And one of those bases is in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. It's about 1,000 miles away plus from Iran, but that is where it's a joint U.S. UK base, but that is where the U.S. can fly heavy bomber aircraft like B-52s, perhaps even B-2s, like the ones that dropped the bunker busting bombs against Iranian nuclear facilities last summer, but they had to fly from the U.S. So it cuts down on a lot of the logistics, or some of the logistics, versus flying missions from much longer distances to include the U.S.
I'm not sure if you can necessarily speak to this, but we did learn from CENTCOM just a short time ago that unfortunately 3 of the U.S. Warplanes there that were over Kuwait were shot down in mistaken fire, friendly fire there by Kuwait. At this point, we're still working to get some more information, but both the U.S. and Kuwait saying this was a friendly fire situation and that the 3 planes had 6 pilots, all of which were able to get out of there safely. So I have to imagine friendly fire situations like this probably do happen more than we realize.
They unfortunately do, Josh, and in other conflicts in which the U.S. Has flown these combat operations in the Middle East, the first Iraq War, the second Iraq War, the war against ISIS, these incidents also happened, but it's unclear what happened, particularly with the in Kuwait. Were these F-15s, were they flying out of Kuwait, or were they transiting Kuwait from one part of the region to another? Why did the Kuwaiti air defense operators or network, why didn't they identify those American F-15s before? There's always a lot of coordination and technical information sharing that happens in these situations. So this is quite unusual, though, to see 3 being shot down in one location. But we're just gonna have to wait and see, with all the particulars of what actually happened.
And it's interesting because as we were talking, we just got this statement coming in from CENTCOM that provides a little more information and says at 11:03 p.m. Eastern Time, March 1st, which would be last night, 3 U.S. F-15E Strike Eagles flying in support of Operation Epic Fury went down over Kuwait due to an apparent friendly fire incident. During active combat that included attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drones, the U.S. Air Force fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses. All 6 air crew ejected safely, have been safely recovered, and are in stable condition. Kuwait has acknowledged this incident, and we are grateful for the efforts of the Kuwaiti Defense Forces and their support in this ongoing operation. The cause of the incident is under investigation. Additional information will be released as it becomes available. So again, we're just learning all about this, and that's the brief statement put out there by CENTCOM. So as we get additional details, we're going to bring them to you folks at home watching us right now. Javed, I want to talk about kind of the future here, because we know that at about 8 o'clock, so just about 50 minutes from now, we are expecting that we're going to hear from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. We're also going to hear from the Joint Chief of Staff's chairman, that is Dan Raisen-Kane. He's going to be providing comments about Operation Epic Fury as well. What are you maybe hoping to hear? What are you hoping to get answers on?
So one would think that with the press conference that's going to happen, similar to last summer when both Pete Hegseth and General Kane gave a press conference in the aftermath of Midnight Fury, they are going to walk through. Now, this circumstances are different. We're not talking about a limited series of strikes from like last summer. We're talking about thousands of missions that have been flown already. I think they're not going to get into the details of any specific one, I would imagine, but more broad overview of the number of different missions that have been flown already, the number of different targets that have been hit, what potentially may be considered in the future. They're obviously not going to give away the war plan, in that is still under consideration, and that's dynamic too, because as you gather more intelligence on the ground about different targets, then you have to put the operations together and the target packages together to go after those targets. So I expect it'll be at a more strategic level, and then they'll probably take a lot of questions, but I don't get the sense they'll talk about any one particular mission or operation.
Yeah, and we're going to wait to see that. Of course, I have to imagine that they are going to take questions, just like we saw after Operation Midnight Hammer. They held a very similar news conference together. They made statements, each of them, and kind of gave the basics of everything, then took questions from members of the media. That went on for about an hour or so. So we'll see, of course, how this plays out. But again, that is expected to get underway here in just about 48 minutes. So we're going to bring it to folks watching us here live, uninterrupted, commercial free on Live Now from Fox. We, of course, have the ability to do that, and we want to do that so folks can see it in full and make decisions for themselves. All right, as far as what happens next, what do we need to be watching for overall as the hours and the days progress here?
So clearly, the U.S. and Israeli campaign is going to continue, and there are operations happening as you and I have been talking these last 10 plus minutes. But one thing that has the potential to move the needle in one direction or the other is the Iranian response. And here we are into day 3, and Iran is still firing the different weapons that they have conventionally, the ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles, the drones. That inventory is being depleted, because every time they fire a weapon, they lose it. And then in the flip side, every time a weapon is fired, it leaves a signature. And that's what the US and Israel are now going to be hunting for. How do you find those launchers, whether they're fixed, whether they're mobile, whether they're, and then their storage sites, their production sites, all of that whole network is trying to be mapped out right now. But if Iran continues to fire these weapons and they're not all destroyed, and they won't be in the next few days or even used, how many or how high is the cost Iran can impose on both the U.S. and Israel and these other countries in the region? Because as we've talked about, they've already killed American service personnel, they've killed civilians, they've damaged buildings and infrastructure. And I think this is a deliberate strategy by Iran to make the cost so high politically in each of these countries and here in the U.S. that it'll change the calculus on the campaign. And so we're just going to have to wait and see how that plays out.
A lot to see how it plays out in the coming hours and days. Javed Ali, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, helping to break it down and provide that expertise. I'm sure we'll see you again in just a few days here. But anything we missed, anything that you want to make sure to add before I let you go?
And I wrote about this too in the article this weekend, Josh, but we haven't seen yet Iran use its unconventional warfare capabilities, terrorism, cyber operations, at least as far as we know. But that is a serious threat. And if Iran were to certainly try to do something in the terrorism world, either through the IRGC Quds Force, its unconventional warfare wing, or in partnership with a group like Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is attacking Israel as we speak, and Israel is hitting back, that could be another factor that really changes the calculus. And so we're going to have to wait and see if a terrorism attack or plot emerges as well.
All right, Javed Ali there. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Josh.
And I want to pop this up on your screen once again as we follow all of the developments. We have this post coming in from the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. It says, in response to the rockets fired from Lebanon to Israel, the IDF precisely struck senior Hezbollah terrorists in Beirut, dozens of Hezbollah and Iranian terror regime command centers, and a site that was used by Hezbollah to store weapons in the Tyre. The IDF is prepared for a multiple front scenario and to combat any threat posed to Israel and Israeli civilians. Of course, we do know that as Iran has been firing missiles over at Israel since really the strikes happened in the hours that followed, sadly, about a dozen people have been confirmed dead as a result of missiles that have struck different locations there in Israel And as we take a live look at this hour over Tel Aviv, we also know from speaking with folks there that the sirens are once again sounding here. That has been the case all over the last 48 hours or so. Expected, of course, to continue as the days here progress. Again, as always, we'll keep you posted on Live Now from Fox as we get additional details.